Greetings, everyone, and welcome to the IB Me, You Be You show, where we discuss all things leadership and leadership development. I am your host, Antoine, and joining me today is a very special guest, Carmelita. How do it's Botelho, right, Carmelita? The
Yes,
last name?
Botelho, yes.
Wonderful. Carmelita is the founder and the CEO of CMB Real Estate Solutions, which helps retailers, developers, and investors create meaningful business solutions through strategic real estate planning, advisory, and brokerage. I'm so excited to talk to you today and learn more about you and your business and your leadership journey. Um, uh, is there anything about you that you think is important for listeners to know as far as your sort of what you do and what your why is, I guess.
Sure, sure. Well, thank you for giving me the opportunity to be here, Antoine. It's a pleasure, and it's been so lovely to make this connection through the MSML Pepperdine program. But yeah, CMB Real Estate Solutions. Just think of me as your retail real estate guru. When things go wrong and don't know which way to go, if you're a retailer, restaurateur, landlord, or developer, I'm your go-to. I'm about strategy, optimization, and doing things that have long-term sustainability.
I love that, and I'm super curious to learn more about it. And I remember, yes, when we met at Waves Weekend at Pepperdine, that something we have in common is the Masters in Management and Leadership. And congratulations to you. I know you just completed your coursework
Yes.
in December, I guess, and you'll be walking in April, so that's super exciting. And I want to talk more about that as well, obviously. Um, so for starters, tell me more about again, the real estate solutions, CMB Real Estate Solutions, and your business again that you've had now for 17 years, I think it is. And I'm just curious, just for someone maybe who's not familiar, again, when I think about real estate, I think like many people, maybe you think about buying and selling maybe a personal residence, but obviously there's a lot more to it than that. So just maybe explain a little bit more about your area of expertise, and then we can talk about the sort of the dynamics and how it's evolved over the years.
Sure, absolutely. Yes, when I say real estate, everybody's like, "Oh, I have a home to sell," or "Can you help me buy a home?" And you do not want me doing that for you. So in commercial real estate, there's different asset classes, right? So if you are at a shopping center or you're driving through a Starbucks or you're going to stop off and get gas, somebody had to figure out where to locate those particular type of uses. So that is my expertise is on the retail shopping center side of commercial real estate. There's various different folks that do industrial and other folks that do office. And so it's a very specialized category of commercial real estate. So what I do is I help retailers that are looking to expand their brand in brick and mortar. I help them strategize, whether a trade area will work for them, where in that trade area would work best, and then identify, secure, negotiate a lease agreement or a purchase and sell agreement, and create a leasehold or a position in a particular marketplace. So that's for the retailer standpoint. And then I do the reverse on the landlord side. If a landlord or an investor is looking to develop a particular piece of property that's zoned commercial for a shopping center, I help advise them in terms of what type of shopping center to build, what kind of uses would actually be interested, how do you get the best possible uses and the highest profitability out of those particular developments. So, I've worked in the retail sector for over 3 decades, and I'm really passionate about it. I find that it's very challenging. It's very people oriented, even though there's a lot of science behind it. It's really more an art form. I tell people, like, mostly what I do is 99% psychology, right? Because everybody's looking at it in a different way. And I find people fascinating. So that's essentially what I do at CMB Real Estate Solutions. I started this company, over 17 years ago, but it was out of necessity because I used to be development within Long's Drug Stores, if you remember them way back in the day.
I do.
And in retail, it's fairly volatile. Like when the economy changes and shifts and moves, my specialty in house with a corporation has a tendency to be a fairly well-paid employee, spending all the company's money. So when things change and it's time to tighten up the purse strings, we're usually the first to go. So out of necessity, back in the recession in 2009, it was, oh my goodness, what do I do? Nobody was hiring people like me. So I created this business out of necessity to raise my son. I'm a single mom. And it bode well for me for quite some time, but we weren't living in a digital world. So I was working all day, working all night, and still trying to be a single mom. So I was recruited back into corporate America and was working in various different companies. And then last year, I was again laid off of that particular
Mm,
corporation. And so what was nice is the ability to have this as a backup plan, something to
mhm.
fall back on with the infrastructure that I already created. So prior to this, I was the VP of real estate at Grocery Outlet for 7 years and built out that brand across the US, and the last 4 years built in the East Coast. So built over 100 stores, which I'm very proud of. Love the brand. I hope they
Mhm.
are able to navigate through this difficult time. But it was just a way for me to say, where am I at today and how do I pivot and shift? Like I always say, it's like God's way of saying, okay, I have something
Right,
better for you.
right. That helps give me a much better idea. Because I was definitely curious to understand the nuances. And you touched on a couple of things that I was meaning to ask you about, specifically how the um, real estate uh, real estate industry has sort of changed based on one, um, work from home, not as many people going to office as they used to, let's say prior to COVID. That was certainly a reason why commercial real estate maybe isn't doing as well as it used to. Now, I know different parts of the country are affected differently. I know San Francisco, for example, maybe is hit a little harder than maybe a more rural area where you don't have as many corporations. But I was also curious, what about yeah, technology? How that's changed the industry? Um, so can you just speak on that a little bit, because or explain a little bit more about maybe how those factors affect markets and obviously the industry overall?
Yeah, well, I could speak to commercial real estate as it relates to retail. So when the economy shifts, the pandemic hits, or return back to work, it changes customers' spending habits, right? Think about your own day to day, week to week, how your family shops, how they spend their money. So when, inflation hits, you spend differently. When the pandemic was here, you were obviously couldn't go out. So that impacts in whether it's a positive or a negative way. So when I was at Grocery Outlet and the pandemic hit, obviously grocery sales went way skyrocketed, right? So we were like, "Yay, we're doing great. Let's expand the brand." Because everybody was forced to stay home and forced to cook. Nobody was able to go out to restaurants and socialize. So you had, and plus, during any difficult time, alcohol sales go up. So, that particular category did really well. But now that things are returned back to a sense of new normal, there's never going to be back to the way it was, is people are looking to connect and socialize. So you're seeing more experiential type of retail uses coming online. We all thought, oh, the buffets are gone and the jumpy houses are gone, and where you commune together are gone. But the reality was, we're humans, right? So we thirst for that physical interaction. So those have you start to see more of those online. You're seeing more pickleball courts, and you're seeing more VR gatherings. So it affects on the retail side. It ebbs and flows with the type of uses that are growing, the type of uses that stop growing. Right now, because of what's going on in the world, grocery prices are up. So grocery, unfortunately, is hurting. People aren't spending as much in the grocery store, um, you know, and then tariffs are impacting soft good users, right? Because a lot of those particular products were coming from overseas. So the price has gone up. So are you really a discounter if you're charging more than people are typically used to. So the environment and the economy and what's going on in the world directly impacts my world in the retail real estate section. You think about construction costs. If the construction costs are high, well, how much new development are you going to see? Because it becomes cost prohibitive. You know, and so that affects prices on sales. So it's a combination of things that impact my world. So I have to be on top of it. I have to know what's going on in the world. I read a lot of articles and what's to be expected. What's the market doing? What's the Fed doing? Are the interest rates going up? Are they going down? So it's very much you know, I have FOMO. I have a fear of missing out. So it's a great line of work for me because I like to be aware of what's going on, and that could be the learner in me, and that we could talk about that in the MSML program.
Yeah.
And a lot about that. But in terms of the return to work, for what I do, because you have to be in various markets and understand what's happening in those various markets, being behind a desk, behind a screen is not, you know, effective. You know, how do you know people where people are driving and where they're shopping unless you're in those trade areas? So for my particular role, I found the most effective way is to be in those markets, drive those arterials, be at those shopping centers, be inside the Starbucks at a particular time, be inside, you know, a grocery store at peak hours and really see what people are buying. Is their basket size small? Is it large? You know, so for my role, being remote has been pretty common for me. I've had several different roles where I was home office. So the pandemic wasn't too alarming for me, but for other facets of the business where your strategy or your finance or you're an analyst, that was challenging for them because their environment dramatically changed. Then obviously with the pandemic, it wasn't just one person being home, it was the entire family.
Mhm.
So the efficiency of a particular employee that had, you know, maybe three kids at home that was trying to Zoom online for school while that particular person was trying to get a workload done while their significant others in another room on a Zoom. So it did impact the efficiency and productivity
Mhm.
of that particular role. But now in San Francisco, as you mentioned, there was this mandate to come back to work, and it that does have an effect on retail activity, right? If you look at downtown San Francisco, there was several businesses that just went belly up, right? Because nobody's eating out, nobody's going and having a lunch meeting, nobody's meeting for coffee, nobody's having a happy hour, nobody's having dinner after work with a client. So it's been a slow rebuild now that things are going back, but now that there's a mandate and there's some activity, those particular restaurants or service providers are starting to see an uptick in frequency. And the hope is now with, you know, we have a new mayor. And so there's a
Mhm.
whole new resurgent. We're calling it the new Renaissance period of San Francisco. And that's happening in various different major metros, not just San Francisco, but this is one example.
Yeah. And last question on the subject, just out of curiosity, um, how much effect do you think Amazon has had on, you know, retail and um, shopping and the ease of you know, them buying Whole Foods, obviously, and just when it comes to pricing, et cetera, and how it affects the willingness for brands to purchase large off space for their brick and mortar stores.
Well, there's no doubt Amazon has dramatically changed everybody's shopping habits, right? Because it's convenience. Me in my role, I was traveling a lot, so it was much more convenient for me in transit at an airport to oh, I need this and I need that. It was so much easier and accessible to be on your phone or in your laptop, order it, and then you have Prime. It gets delivered in a couple days, and it just, you know, miraculously shows up. So you know that has changed everybody's shopping habits, but as a result it was twofold. One, you are getting goods and products from outside your immediate trade area. So those municipalities and cities weren't generating the sales tax revenue to help support the marketplace, right? That at a local level. So, you know, some things have been adjusted over time, but it's still the habits are there, and then the pandemic hit, and then it just became way too easy. And so once a person and a consumer has a habit, it's hard to break, right? Amazon sends you this little reminder that says, hey, you bought this, X amount of months ago, it might be time to reorder. And oh, that's just too easy, right? You're not thinking, oh, I'd much rather try to drive to a Target or a Costco or a Walmart or my grocery store at a peak hour and get toilet paper, right? Oh, it's just too easy. I can hit a button. So that dramatically impacts. Um, I think what was interesting, just my personal opinion, what was interesting about Amazon purchasing Whole Foods was I think they wanted to dabble into and double down on we want this delivery service, but we also want that customer that wants that touch and feel, that wants to have that experience. And you can argue they've done it well, and you can argue they've ruined it, right? Some people that were, hardcore Whole Foods buyers are like, it's not the Whole Foods I remember. But I think they're doing their best to try to understand that model and modify. They've gone through different rounds. They've tried, the concept of Amazon Fresh to see how that's been received. That didn't go over so well. So I think Whole Foods buying the brand and buying the name and having a portfolio of stores that people already had a customer habit of going to was quite smart. And a lot of retail companies do that. They
Mhm.
grow via acquisition versus, pioneering and growing organically.
Right. And I'm a fan of Amazon, I admit, but I will say there are times, depending on what I'm buying, where I want to go in person. I want to touch something, I want to feel it, try it on, or so maybe it's a little different with um, uh, things you consume, like groceries or beverages, etc. So I wanted to change gears and learn more about your leadership journey. I really enjoyed one of our previous conversations where you talked about your journey because it sounded so much like mine. And as far as after high school and going into the workplace and then deciding to continue your education later. So, do you mind sharing that story? Because I just remember really being moved and just felt a lot of connection with you. And maybe there's others out there that are watching that will enjoy hearing it as well.
Yeah, I would love to share. I moved out of my family's home at 16. I had a very interesting childhood. And so for me, when I moved out at 16, I could continue to perpetuate the cycle or rise above and do something different, right? So I've always been a bit of an overachiever, right? I figured that was my way up. Knowledge, education, aligning myself with people that I admired was sort of my way out of that environment. And so very early on, I decided, and I loved school. Yeah, I loved learning. I was like, wow, this is amazing. You learn something new every day. So I put myself through community college, and then I had sort of an office management job, and I thought, okay, I need to have a real career. So I lined up with a temp agency, drove this woman crazy because I said, I just want to have a career. And for a year and a half, she sent me out to various different companies. And growing up in the Silicon Valley, that was pretty easy, right? Semiconductor companies, microchip companies, but I was like, no, these aren't my people. And out of the blue, one day, she said, okay, keep an open mind. I think you'd be perfect for this environment, but it's a clerical position. It's literally, minimum wage. And it's clerical, so you're answering phones and filing, but it's for a department within an organization I think you'll find fascinating. And she was spot on. I went in, and it was a company called Food Maker that owned Jack in the Box and Coco Family restaurants. And I went in, it was their real estate and construction and design department. And I was answering phones and filing, and I was like, this is fascinating. And then I realized, wait, how did that Jack in a Box get at the corner of the main? And how did Coco's family restaurants end up getting in that shopping center? So I found what they did really intriguing. And it was a combination of all the skill sets that I had. I liked numbers, I liked strategy, I was analytical, but I love people. I love talking to people. I find there's something always interesting and something I can learn and take away, whether it's good or bad. Um, and so it was a combination of those things. So I just asked a lot of questions and became a permanent employee. And that's kind of how I started. I was 19. That's when I started in the business. So I've been doing it since. I'm just like drinking the Kool-Aid, right? I was like, this is great. So, as I started there, I started at the very bottom, worked my way up the ranks over the years, worked for various different companies, really blessed to be aligned with people that saw, the diamond in the rough and said, hey, this is where you need to be, and help guide me and connect me to the right people. And that was always relayed to me that, don't forget, pay it forward, pay it forward, right? When you get to be, the big head honcho, make sure you pay it forward. And so as I navigated through my career, again, like I said, it's a very volatile business, right? Depending on what's happening in the world, the mini recession, the recession, the pandemic. As a result, I have gone through some mergers. I've gone through some layoffs, a layoff that I got laid off twice from the company because I left, loved it, came back, and got laid off again. But what I learned very early on, that it's not personal, it's just the world, and nothing is a forever. There's no stability. We're way back in the day when our parents were working, they stayed with the company for 30 something years, right? It was the first
Mm.
job they ever had. My mom worked for the phone company. My dad was a longshoreman, you know, it's just not like that anymore. So as I was going through those career adjustments and changes, I felt like my education was really important, because as you move up the ranks, oh, what's your requirement? Oh, you need to have a bachelor's degree. Like, oh, got to put myself through school again. And then most recently, I was doing the job on an interim basis at an executive level, but I was told that I lacked certain areas for qualifications to actually have officially the position. And that's what stemmed my desire to get a master's degree. Because I'm one of those people, like, if you tell me there's an obstacle, I'm just going to overcome it. So it won't be an obstacle anymore. So that's what led me to my journey at Pepperdine MSML program, because I could have easily got an MBA, but it's something I've already do finance, I already do economics, I already do strategy. And I thought, if I'm going to spend the time and money, I really wanted it to be in an area of importance for me. And people are so important that I thought, okay, this is where my heart lies. So I really want to do this MSML program because it was very people centered in leadership. And where I thought I was going with the program is not where I ended up today, but I'll stop there because I know you have other questions, but
Yeah.
hopefully that was a very long-winded way to answer the
Yeah.
question, but it's a long story.
Yeah, no, but please continue. You said it ended up differently than it started. So please continue. Explain what that
Yeah.
means. I'm just
So
curious.
what I had anticipated starting the program was that I would go through the program, I would meet the requirements, and then lo and behold, I'll work my way into the promotion that I thought I was going to be in the particular organization I worked with. But as I was going through the program, it really opened my eyes to who I am as an individual, what I would like to do with my life moving forward, where my passion lies. I want to help people. I get so much joy for helping people, and I felt like in my role where I was at, I was helping, but it was a very limiting factor, right? You're helping within the four walls of an organization that say, oh, you can't be creative and go here, and you can't be creative and go there. And I thought, I could only be so helpful where I was at. And it just so happened when I had both my knees replaced. And when I came back after leave, it was very evident a lot of things had changed in the organization, and it was clear that change and that trajectory wasn't in line with my values or my goals for myself. And it just so happened that, again, I was one of the many folks that were laid off, and it's one of those things that it doesn't seem like a blessing in disguise when you're going through it, because you can't help. You're human, right? You have emotions, and you feel like, wait a minute, I did all this for you. And, but you quickly, for me, because I've been through it before, I quickly got over it and said, okay, no, this has happened before, and it's always something better on the other side. And what a great timing, because as I was going through various different classes through the program, I couldn't, Antoine, it was like so timely to talk about, because I was like, okay, if I do get laid off, and this happens. What do I do? And I still have the company. And lo and behold, we're going through, one of the sessions is organizational change. So it just really opened my eyes a bit more and simplified my journey in leadership. It was just time to move on. I was very proud of what I did. I'm still proud of what I did. I still have really great connections. I wish them well, but it's now time to take those learnings and that experience and go a different direction.
And do you want to talk more about that direction? Like, what are you thinking right now? I'm excited
Yeah,
for you. It
yeah.
sounds, I love hearing these types of stories, and I'm glad that um, you benefited from the MSML experience to get you to where you are. What's the future look like?
Yeah, so the future for me right now is I'm fully committed to my own company, in leading and providing goods and services to people within the arena of growth and optimization and this uncertain VUCA environment, right? There's so many uncertainties. So if you're a business owner and you're like, hey, my lease is coming up for renewal, should I renew? Instead of just like signing the paper and saying, okay, all the terms and conditions that I signed 10 years ago, let's kind of extend that another 10 years. I have the ability to come in and help them and say, hey, given the environment and the changes, let's look at what the market really yields. Let's look at how do we put you in a more beneficial situation that you have the long-term sustainability, that and I have the relationships within the organizations I've worked for in the past. And I'm really pleased to say, I'm a big believer of people, the Maya Angelou quote, people won't remember what you said, people won't remember what you did, but they'll always remember how you made them feel.
Yeah,
And I try to live by that because you never know who you're going to have to go back to talk to help you through a particular situation. So I feel like for the reputation that I've built, the jobs that I have done, the experiences I've gone through, that I can leverage those relationships and maximize and benefit others that may not have the skill set, the knowledge, um, to tap into that and provide a better situation for them. So, right now I'm focused, like, it's three buckets, right? Retailers, that includes restaurants, that want to grow their brand, but a larger brokerage house may not want to take them on because it's, smaller businesses, it's a lot more hand holding, it's a little bit more brain damage. They don't have the credit or the capital, but they have a desire. And if it's something that and a person that I feel and believe in, I want to be able to help them. The next bucket is landlords, investors, owners that may have a challenging shopping center that they don't know how to backfill. Like for instance, the drugstore component. All of those have a different model now. So you've seen Walgreens close, CVS close, Rite Aid, and these are investors that typically were absentee. They bought the building thinking there was going to be a consistent income flow coming into them or to their descendants, and now they have a vacant box and they don't know what to do with it, right? So I want to have the ability to go and say, hey, I've done this before where I've been creative and backfilled it with non-traditional uses, or hey, if you put a little money in it and you subdivide it, here's how you do it. And then lastly, developers that are looking at a piece of property, or will have money that want to invest in a piece of property to develop. There's various different ways to do it to maximize the benefit. It could be, certain areas within California that have opportunity zones that have all these incentives that cities and municipalities can provide to lower the cost. It could be the CEQA reform. So there's ways to get around if you add a residential component, and it's all like, it sounds like Greek, right? But those are all the skill sets and the knowledge and the relationships that I have that can benefit somebody that's not what they do for a living. So what they say, if you don't know, you hire somebody to do it for you.
right, right. Um, and going back to Pepperdine and the MSML, I know that like you, I was excited about getting a master specifically in management and leadership because that was a particular passion of mine. I wasn't as interested in MBA like you. But just out of curiosity, did you stumble upon Pepperdine, or did you know specifically that that's where you wanted to be? I'm just curious, how did you?
Yeah.
Because it was almost accidental in my case. I stumbled upon it, but how was it for you?
That's a very great question because I get asked that a lot and then I have to rethink. So several years ago, before I actually started this program, I contemplated getting a master's because I did work for a publicly traded company and I did have a desire to work up the ranks. And I asked the question in a publicly traded company, how important is a master's degree? And at the time, I was told not very, it was like 50-50. Some people said, oh, you got to have it. Most publicly traded companies want the pedigree, they don't want the liability. You need to get it back. And the other was like, no. So I had done some research, and at that time, it was pre-pandemic, right? So at that time, I was traveling a lot for work and I had a very heavy workload. So what I looked into was various different programs that were hybrid, where I can be in person, be virtual. And I was also working in the East. So I looked at a bunch of different programs. Pepperdine was on that list because in our world in commercial retail real estate, Graziadio Business School, he was one of the original developers of all the Kmart's in California. So in real estate, Pepperdine holds a lot of weight. So I looked at that, but I was like, oh, Malibu, I'd have to go every so once in a while. That's not too far. But then it just sort of, fizzled, right? Because at the time, my organization's like, you don't need it. None of the other execs have it. Don't worry about it. So I let it go. So as I kind of went on, one of our executives, our former COO that retired, was a Pepperdine, was going through and getting his doctorate in organizational management. And he, at that time, was doing the hybrid, but he had a home down in Southern California. So it would be like, oh, Tom's not here. He's down in SoCal for getting his PhD. And when all this started to come back up, like, hey, you need to relook at this, I went back to all those programs, and it was after post pandemic, right? So a lot of the programs had full virtual, and I thought, okay, this is a little bit more available to me. And the more I talked to various folks in my industry about what would be the most meaningful if I got this degree. One, it was people oriented, and the other was Pepperdine is a great pedigree. For the money that you spend, it's going to be meaningful. Having that on your resume is going to be impactful. And so, Tom, Tom McMahon, I consider him one of my mentors, my later in life mentors, and we got to know each other pretty well in terms of our style of leadership, how we communicated with people. And he said, Carmelita, you need to do this MSML program. It's just built for you. He's like, I think you will really excel. And if you're going to spend the money and the time, you might as well do it with something you're passionate about because then it won't feel like work, right? This is what people tell you when you're young. Don't get a job, do something you love and you'll never feel like you worked a day in your life, right? So I thought, oh, I like that philosophy. So that's how I didn't necessarily stumble upon it. I did a lot of research, but how I finally made the decision with Pepperdine, that was my journey there.
This is great. I love it. Well, Carmelita, thank you so much for your time. I really enjoyed hearing about your journey and learning more about the commercial real estate business and your personal success story. I'm honored to have spent this time with you. I know I learned a lot, and my hope is that everybody watching today as well will learn something that they can use. How should people get a hold of you if they want to learn more?
Absolutely. So I do have a website, www.cmbrealestatesolutions.org, or you can always feel free to email me, Carmelita at cmbreso.com. Or yeah, I have LinkedIn. I kind of have everything out there.
Okay.
So yeah, feel free to reach out. I do offer 30-minute free consultations for folks that want to learn more or have a particular situation they want to see if there's some way I can help. I will say this, if I can't help them, I will probably know somebody that can. So I'd be happy to refer out any opportunities.
I love that. And I make sure to put all the links to how to contact you in the show notes. Carmelita, thanks again. Much
Thank
appreciated.
you. I appreciate you so much. Thank you.